wife. And today we're going to talk about keeping the wood on the lathe. And as I'm sure we've all done it once in our lifetimes, that's not always easy. Ejecting wood from the lathe can have amusing side effects or deadly side effects. We won't talk about that part. In general, when you're orienting wood on the lathe, there's two grain orientations. Long grain, or lengthwise spindle turning, sometimes called, but that's not real. We can have wood oriented this way and just hold it in one end. Or I can turn it between centers. And the same is true of a bowl. I can grab a bowl, grain, and just hold it on the headstock, or I can bring up the tailstock and turn it between centers. Grain orientation doesn't matter. What matters is keeping it on the lathe. We'll start with between centers, spindle stock, spindle orientation. The classic method of holding wood on the lathe is which one do you want? Okay, I'll put it there. 4-pin, standard 4-pin flute top. There's also smaller ones. Small 4-pin. The advantage these have is you have 4 pins grabbing the wood. The disadvantage is the wood has to be square. If it's not square, you could end up just grabbing with one flute or maybe 2 flutes. Well, if you're going to grab it with only 2 flutes anyway, there is a 2 flute. So you can do it that way. There is what I prefer, which is the Streb or multi-point. The advantage these have is this pin right here in the center is spring-loaded. When I apply some pressure, it goes in a little. That means I can back off my tailstock pressure, and the wood is still held. And in fact, the lathe can still be turning, but the wood isn't. These come in a number of configurations. You can mount them directly in the headstock, or you can mount them in your chuck. You don't have to take the chuck off to turn between centers. There's all kinds of doohickeys for doing that. If you go old school, on the tailstock is a dead center. The thing is, you can drive with a dead center too. It's very useful if you're making handles. I've got several handles I made over there. I drilled the hole first, slid it up over the dead center, put a live center in it, and turned it. The advantage is, if I make a catch, it stops turning because it slides on the dead center. Between centers, you can also screw drive. The disadvantage in this type of screw drive, and why I never use this anymore, is those threads are too small. One catch, you strip it out, and you can't turn it. It's nearly useless. There is a really odd headstock drive called a bobbin lace drive. And this is a square hole that will take a 3/8 to 7/16 piece of wood. Put this in your headstock, bring up your tailstock, and you can turn a finial very easily. And it's not going to slip on the headstock side. The only problem you might have is when you start getting the finial fine. Well, think about it. You've got a finial, it's getting really, really, really thin, and you're pushing on it. You've got it in compression. It's going to start doing this. And pretty soon it's going to do this a little bit more, and then it's going to break. So there is a solution to that. A Jacobs chuck on a live center. Have that in your tailstock. When you get to that final little bit where it's starting to flex, instead of having the wood in compression, back it off just a touch, just a tiny bit. The wood's still going to be held, but it's not pushing anymore. The wood can relax and it's not going to oscillate nearly as bad. Vern? Vern has a good point. He says don't turn off the lathe and then turn it back on because the change in kinetic energy will snap the finial. And he's exactly right. If you have something really thin and it's stopped and you start it moving again, the wood grade can't handle the change in torque and it snaps. That's a basic overview of just how to grab on the headstock side. On the tailstock side, too, the most common anymore today is the standard live center. This is sold by One Way, it's sold by Robust, it's sold by Powermatic, it's sold by Grizzly and other importers. The threading here is 3/4 10, and there's a nearly infinite variety of things that you can put on this. You can knock the center pin out and have a cup center. You can knock the center pin out and put one of these in, which is a miniature cone center. You can leave the center pin in and put a larger cone center. I was using one of these and my dead center when I was making handles with holes drilled at either end. That way, both ends were held centered, but again, if I got a catch, it just slipped. There's larger cones. The advantage these larger cones have is they're bidirectional. I can put them on either way depending on what I'm trying to hold on to. This might be useful if I'm having something like an egg that I want to hold on the tailstock or into a mug. And there's even bigger ones. But again, threaded 3/4 10. And you're not limited by what's available commercially. All you have to do is buy a 3/4 10 nut and put it in a block of wood. This one is designed to hold the business end of a wooden spatula on the tailstock while I'm turning the handle. Just nicely slotted. This is just a wooden follower. I can use it, say if I'm turning a bowl or a vase and I need to bring up a piece of wood and I don't want anything that mars it. Wood on wood is not typically going to give us a mar. In fact, there's another little trick for wood on wood. Don't put the wood directly on the wood. Use a foam pad fine sandpaper. That way, if it does slip, it just sands it. Now, there are other live center systems that are modular and interchangeable. My favorite of the others is the Nova series. This right now is set up as a cup, but I can change it to a cone, I can change it to a triple cone, I can change it to a screw, or using a bolt adapter, because this is threaded 1/4 20 on the inside, I can bring up anything. Again, I could bring up a wood block on this system. The two systems are similar in concept, but they're not interchangeable. None of the parts from this will go on the one-way Powermatic, Robust, whichever brand you buy, and none of theirs will go on this one. But they both satisfy the same concept, the concept of interchangeability. Yes? Jamie wants to know how aggressive she can be about knocking the center point out. You can be real aggressive. Yeah. The little bar comes with your one-way that you use for changing those. That's the drive for driving it out. The joke around here has been for a lot of years, how can we tell when Eli Avisaria has been through for a seminar? Easy. He's knocked the pin out of the club's live center. Because that's the first thing he does. He doesn't turn with that pin. And he has a point. He doesn't use a vacuum chuck, and that leaves just a little round mark. Well, if he takes a sharp tool, he can make it into a decorative detail. And it looks like a decorative detail on the back of a bowl instead of a ring and a dot. Now, besides what I showed you on the one-way, it has another advantage too. This right here is a 3/4 10 to 1 1/4 adapter. I put this on here. And I can now reverse chuck this bowl. I could also do that with this. The disadvantage this has is I can't turn the lathe on. This, because it's a live center, I can turn the lathe on. The advantage in turning the lathe on is I can have the lathe running at a low speed, turn on my vacuum, and it'll pull it in center. If I have this, the bowl's gravity sucks. The bowl's gonna do just a little bit of this. And a little bit of that is maybe enough to make your life difficult. But if the bowl is turning, it can't really settle. Now we're going to talk about face turning only. Everybody knows about putting a bowl on a chuck and making it round and hollowing it out. But how are you going to hold it when you turn it around? And that has a number of solutions. The most obvious solution, as far as I'm concerned, is a vacuum chuck. These are vacuum chucks. They're standard, I can't remember the brand name of these right now. Pardon, John? Well, they're, okay, toilet, John says they're toilet plungers, but hold fast, yes, these are hold fast brand, but these are not hold fast seals. These are rubber chucky seals, and they actually hold better than a hold fast seal. Rubber chucky is a great place that Hinky has turned us on to. Now, these are designed for a whole headstock that you can stick a pipe through. But there are headstocks that you can't stick your vacuum pipe all the way through. So One Way and several other companies make an adapter that goes right here on the headstock, and doesn't turn. So I can have a hose coming out here at the bottom to my vacuum pump. While the headstock is spinning, this adapter isn't spinning.
Switch microphone.
Want to switch mics? This one's dropping out every once in a while.
And we'll just leave the other one on there. Stick that in my pocket or something.
We'll put it in the other pocket.
There you go.
Does this make me a two-fisted speaker? Okay. Now there are other methods of reversing the bowl for taking the tenon off besides vacuum chucking. My favorite is a trick Dale Larson taught me that I know he stole from somebody else. I think, you remember who he stole that from, Dan? You told me one time, this chuck. But what it is this grabs the bowl by the rim.
I think Dale Larson's the one that demoed.
Well, Dale Larson taught me, but Dan told me one time that he thought Dale Larson got the idea from somebody else.
I'm sure he did.
And I'm sure he did because we all steal from each other. It's how we learn. The advantage this has is there's no vacuum chuck needed, no tailstock pressure required, and it holds the rim very securely. It doesn't work on live edge. Nah, that's not going to work. There is a solution though for live edge. If it's not too live. And this one we have courtesy of Vern. This is what's called a donut chuck. And it holds the bowl by simple compression. And there's a whole bunch of extra bits back there so he can use it on different size diameter bowls and different depths.
How does that run on the lathe?
This just screws right in here. You see I can't screw it on this one because this is 1 by 8 and the lathe is 1 1/4.
Ralph, question on the last one you had, the one that Dale Larson showed you.
Yes.
Is that mounted on coal jaws?
Yes, that is.
Is that what that was?
So what was the question?
She wanted to know how this was constructed. And what it is a set of coal jaws that I have screwed 4 blocks of wood to, and then every time I need to make a different diameter bowl that can't quite grip, we just turn a little bit. And when we're done turning all of this, we take them off, put 4 new blocks on, and can start all over again. As you can tell, we've turned smaller bowls and bigger bowls and bigger bowls and bigger bowls and slightly bigger bowls. And at one point we grabbed something from the inside. And I don't know which of us did this one.
Ralph, show the bottom. There may be people out here who don't know what coal jaws are. So
Coal jaws are 4 metal flat plates. They're available, I think, for every chuck system except Easy. I know they're available for Vicmark, One Way, and Nova. Oh, and Penn State. Now, normally you put 8 rubber feet on them, and you're just grabbing the rim of the bowl with 8 rubber feet. Well, 8 points is far less than a continuous rim grab. That continuous rim grab can really help you. I tried coal jaws once. First time worked, second time didn't. I ejected the bowl, it went up, it came back down, and that's the last time I used them. Yes, Steve?
the one thing I found you have to be careful when using these on the bowl is not to tighten too much, or you can crack the rim of your bowl. So you need to get it snug but not over tight.
Ellen said, because this is hers, she knows, don't tighten it too much or you'll crack the rim.
Before you put that away, when you turn your grooves for each size, the jaws are loose. How do you stabilize the jaw so you can then turn your next ring on it?
it's never been a problem.
Okay.
You tighten it down till the edges meet.
So the edges are just short of meeting.
So you tighten it down against itself, then turn your ring.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where is that? Oh, here it is. Now there is another way to do that, to take the rim off, or the foot off. That's not what I want. There's what I want. Jacob's chuck, they call this a bowl reversing pad. You put it in there, you tighten it down, you bring your bowl up, and you bring your tailstock up, and support it, and cut the tailstock off. The disadvantage this system has, and why I don't use it anymore, is if this slips at all, it mars the inside of the bowl. You get a nice little burn ring all the way around. So I don't use that anymore. Instead, if I'm doing it that way, I use one of these. This is a faceplate and a block of wood. My sanding pad, and bring my tailstock up. Of course, the chuck isn't here. But if this slips, I just am sanding the inside of the bowl.
Ralph?
Yes, Tony?
You know, instead of a faceplate, what I do the same thing, but I just take blocks of wood, I drill and tap them, because I have an 1 1/4 tap for my lathe. I just drill and tap it, and then I use super glue to strengthen the threads.
Okay.
And then I just use that, and I put the pad on it. I make all kinds of.
Tony says he does a similar thing, only he takes the block of wood, drills it and taps it, hardens the threads with super glue, and that eliminates the need for the pad, or the faceplate. Now you can also do that with just a nut. This is a 1 inch nut, 1 1/4 inch nut.
Do you use CA glue or epoxy to put those nuts in?
Okay, I never use CA for anything under stress. CA has terrible shock load. Its shock load fails very easily. I use either epoxy or PVA. I like to use Titebond Quick and Thick. It has a faster set time and a faster tack time, and is just as strong. Here, it must be 10 years ago, Fine Woodworking did a glue strength test, and the general winner was Titebond type PVA, or in general, the PVA wood glues. The worst performing wood glue was the poly expanding, except in one case. And that's gluing end grain to end grain. It's the only place they found it was stronger. Even high glue beat the expanding poly glues.
Expanding poly glues, you're talking Gorilla?
Gorilla, and there's other brands too, but they're expanding poly. You get them wet and they foam.
The ones that kill your dog. The ones that'll kill your dog if he gets a hold of it, because they like to eat that stuff.
Yeah,
You don't ever want to leave a bottle of Gorilla Glue sitting around where your dog can get it.
because it smells like something they like. I don't know why. Now, sometimes, and I'm not sure why, people like to attach bowl blanks to their chuck with large diameter screw drives. And I've tried, these came with my chucks, I've tried them, and I've never been happy. But they do work for some people. I'm not going to tell you you can't use them, but one of the problems you'll run into is that's an inch of threading. That means it's going to go into your wood an inch. And that's maybe more than you want to go in. So get a piece of plywood, make yourself a washer. That'll only go into my wood 1/4 inch. That's maybe not enough, but it gives you the idea. Another common method that we've basically touched on is face plates. You can turn on a face plate too. I can take this, glue a block of wood to it, and turn it. If you're ever using a faceplate with either glue or double sticky tape, never, ever walk away and leave it like this. That's because all glue has creep. And gravity sucks. And you don't know that you're not coming back in 5 minutes, or 5 hours, or 5 days. And it doesn't matter what it is. If you come back in 5 days, it's going to have moved a little. And it's not going to be centered anymore. If you want to use face plates, just take the 30 seconds, take it off, leave it sitting on the lathe, and you'll be a happier camper.
Ralph,
Yes, George?
screws in your faceplate. Don't tell me you're using sheetrock. I'll poke you.
No, George, I don't use sheetrock. George doesn't like sheetrock screws. Sheetrock screws
Are brittle.
are brittle and they bend. I've never had them break. I've had them bend because I've tried them. What I use is deck screws. I don't use stainless or sheet metal screws because the threads on sheet metal screws are designed to cut into sheet metal, not into wood. Whereas the deck screws are designed to hold in wood. Sheet metal screws are very strong, a lot stronger than drywall, but they're not designed for wood, so I don't use them. Well, you can, George.
I use big ones.
You're expendable.
I know I am.
Now, one of the things my wife likes to make is little tiny hollow forms. Well, how do you reverse them? Well, they have a very small opening. So, here's a fitting, goes on my chuck. She brings her little hollow form up, slides it over. Because of all of these little saw cuts, this compresses and flexes a little bit. And she can get support here while she's finishing off the back. Picked that one up from Michael Hoslick from Saskatchewan.